Hi group, my name's SHARON. I'm powerless over alcohol. I swore I wasn't going to say I'm nervous. But I want to thank Charlie and the committee for asking me to do this. I really consider it a privilege to be a part of this. I was taught early in recovery that any time Alcoholics Anonymous asks you to do anything, consider it a privilege. And it is a privilege. I'm here because I want to be sober more than I want to be drunk, and that's the bottom line. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was not that way. My sobriety date, and I've been taught to tell my sobriety date, or I just may not have one, is December 26, 1987. I came here via Turk House. I'm a South Baltimore. I got sober in South Baltimore. I was born in Pigtown. Boy, what a way to start life out. You know, coming from Pigtown, I mean, I had all strikes against me. I was definitely, I think, kind of, when I found booze, I was definitely ready for it. I was an accident waiting to happen. Where to begin? At the beginning, I've been told. I'm nervous. I came here in December of 1987, December 26, 1987, via Turk House, and I did not think that I was an alcoholic. I was never taught to look at my drinking. I'm Irish and Indian, and I came from basically an Irish family where people drank, some more than others. That's about all I remember as far as drinking. Never really looked at drinking. Some people drank, got drunk, tried not to drink anymore, you know, that heavily, and then others didn't drink as much. And that's about as much thought as I gave to drinking. I walked in there. It was a cold winter day. I was practically living out of my car. No one wanted anything to do with me by that time in my life. My children at this point in time were grown and married and were in the process of just detaching themselves from me. See, I believe that your children will go lay in the gutter with you. I mean, they love you unconditionally. And they'll go down with you, you know, they just love, and that's what they do. And for me, I believe that when your children don't want anything else to do with you anymore, something's wrong. And when I got here, not even my kids wanted anything to do with me. I was practically living in my car, and I thought, they just don't understand. You know, I never fit in anywhere. And, you know, I was just always different. No one understood me. And I carried that in a Turk House also with me. I don't know where I'm going with any of this, and I never do. I just ask God basically at the beginning when I chair a meeting or share to let me say what I'm supposed to and not what I want to. And that usually keeps me out of trouble. I walked in Turk House, left side of my face was paralyzed from an overdose of another substance. And I know this is an AA meeting and I have to share with you my experience. My experience was that I knew I had a problem with other substances. I did not think I had a problem with alcohol. I spent 2 days in Franklin Square Hospital, and Christmas Eve of that year I swore that it was my last year on this earth. I just wanted to die. And I just was uncontrollable. I had hurt everybody and everything in my life. I walked into Franklin Square. I remember my daughter saying to me that Christmas Eve, Mom, you look like you're having a stroke. Why don't you go see a doctor? And she knew what I was up to. And I went to Franklin Square Hospital, and they kept me for 2 days and held me over because I had paralysis on the left side of my face. And they got me into Turk House. And I took a cab, parked my car in the parking lot at Franklin Square Hospital, and took a cab to Turk House, you know, directly to there. And I knew that if I'd stopped, I would have never went. I just knew that if I had stopped to check on my car in that parking lot, I would have never made it. I knew that anything at that point in time in my life would have been better than the way I was living. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my background to let you know what it used to be like for me. I come from a lot of foster homes and training school. I was what they called a throwaway kid, and that's not why I drank. I drank because I loved the effects produced by alcohol. You see, just for a moment, when my first drunk, the first time I ever got drunk from alcohol, immediately for the first time in my life, It made me feel whole. For the first time in my life, I was equal. I could dance, I could laugh. I really didn't care what anybody ever thought about me. I felt equal, and I didn't have to deal with all that crap that went around in my head, the whole committee, and I'll never forget that. Never forget that first time I ever got drunk. And I'll share with you a little bit about that later if I get there. If not, that's okay too. I went into Turk House, and my background, a lot of training schools and foster homes. At 11 years old, I watched my mother set herself on fire from a suicide attempt, and that was pretty normal. My mom was in and out of Spring Grove most of her life, and I used to go there, and it was scary, 7, 8, 9 years old. See, I knew about insanity long before I picked up a drink. I knew about insanity. I was an accident waiting to happen. All I had to do was find a drink. And I didn't know that. I did not know that. I went to Spring Grove quite a few times, and all the grown-ups would tell me as a child was that my mother was sick. And I can remember one time going around collecting money door to door, and I didn't understand what kind of sick. I didn't know what mental illness was, but I sure to heck understand what it is today. And they made me give all the money back to the best of the ability, and they took the rest, and I had to give it back because that's something that you couldn't do. But I can remember going to Spring Grove as a child off and on many of my times in my life, and I watched the lady out there that was in the corner throwing an invisible baby up in the air. And she was there because she put her kid in an oven and roasted it. And horrendous things that I was exposed to. And then I found alcohol. It's that simple. Then I found alcohol. I grew up. I got married 3 times. Had 3 kids. Knew about insanity. Violent. Very violent. Angry. I knew about violence and anger. I was not a pretty drunk. And you can ask anyone today. I have ex-husbands and my kids will tell you I was not a pretty drunk. I just hated living and didn't know how to die. I'm also a recovering Catholic. I spent 2 years in the convent with the nuns, God love them, and they taught me lots of good things. I even had a selective hearing there because all I seemed to hear was that God was punishing. And that's what I heard. If you guys talk in the hall, God's going to strike you dead. And these are the things that I heard. I seemed to focus on the negative. To me, living was hell. That's what I thought that life was here on earth. And I can remember a whole lot of stuff in my life. I got married at 16 because I got tired of being in the system. Had 2 kids at 18. He was gone, and had to get my first job. And I discovered alcohol. That's when I learned to drink. I went to work downtown on the block. There was a nightclub full of go-go dancers and stuff, and a girl that I had been in the House of Good Shepherd with was working there, and I was walking around just looking for help, looking for jobs. That's all I knew how to do. Never worked in my life. And Peaches was her name, and I came out and I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "I'm working." "What are you doing down here?" And I said, "Well, I took a bus up here, and I'm looking for work. I have 2 kids, and I have to get a job." And she said, "Oh, come on in. My boss will hire you." And I said, "Doing what?" "Well, I never worked in a nightclub." And she said, "Come on back. He'll hire you. Can you dance?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I went in the back, and I talked to the boss, and he said, "Well, you go up there and you do a set, see? And if I like how you dance, you can have the job, and it pays well." And this is how I learned how to drink. And so I said, "Well, what am I going to do? I don't have an outfit." She said, "Here, borrow mine." And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Get up there in front of all these dirty old men. This was not the way I was taught. I was taught thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's husband or wife. I knew I was going to hell early. You know what I'm saying? And I knew I broke most of the 10 commandments other than short of murder, and that wasn't because I hadn't tried. So I grabbed her outfit, went in the back, and it was getting kind of nice because, they showed me how to put on makeup. I was 18 years old. And I got up there, and before I got up there, I said to her, "Peaches, I can't do this. I can't do this." She said, "Sure you can. Here." She said, "Have one of these." And at that point in time, it was Canadian Mist, and they would give you half a glass, a small a glass filled with Coca-Cola, and the rest was ice. And it was the chaser glass, but I said, why is it half full? She said, well, because after a while, what we do is we go around and we ask these guys to buy us drinks, and then when we drink them, we spit them back into the glass so we don't get drunk, because we make $1 or $2 on every glass that we get these customers to buy us. And I thought, this isn't too bad at all, So I drank that stuff that was in there. It was Canadian Mist at that point in time. I learned later. And matter of fact, I had 5 or 6, and I think I danced all night for free. He didn't even pay me. and that was my first drunk, and I'll never forget it. And I stayed there, and I took to it like a duck to water. I loved what alcohol did for me. I just never thought that person was in there, I probably made a fool out of myself, but thank God for cab drivers. They got me home safe. I got the job, needless to say, and I worked there for a while, and I enjoyed it, and I got lost there. I got really lost there, and that's where I learned how to drink. There wasn't a whole lot of drinking in my background, actually, in foster homes and training schools. I don't remember a whole lot of alcohol. I mean, my mom, due to her insanity, I don't ever remember seeing her drunk or drinking. My father, who I never knew, who I met later in life, did drink quite a bit. I met him at 16. The Good Sisters found him for me and introduced me to him and the Good Shepherds. Anyway, went through a very violent marriage and got out of that, got married again, married a gentleman that was 11 years older than myself, and he proceeded to raise my 2 children from my first marriage, and we eventually, 4 years later, had another daughter, his only child. Now, he drank quite a bit, and I just thought, well, he carries a little pint bottle of mint gin in the back pocket. I don't have to have it, but it keeps me warm in the wintertime, he would tell me, and I didn't know anything about AA. The only thing I knew about AA was AAA, and they towed cars. That's the only A's I knew anything about. So by the time I got here, 2 months shy of being 40 years old, I was ready. Life had kicked my butt, and so did booze. And it was a 17-and-a-half-year violent, nasty, good and bad times. See, I thought that Sharon was miserable because she come from Pigtown, never had anything. Nobody ever wanted her. Poor me, Wayne Brooks, God love him, was my counselor in Turkhouse, and God rest his soul, I love him. He is the first person in this program ever to get my attention. And he said, pour me another drink, Sharon. But you don't understand, I used to tell him in Turkhouse. You don't understand. If you had a husband and kids like mine, you'd drink too. He said, Sharon, nobody ran you down, tied you up, and poured that crap in the hole in your face. That's exactly how he told me, and I got to give it to you the way he told me. I thought I was uniquely different, uniquely sick. I thought if you had my problems, you would do these things too. I justified and rationalized everything I ever did my whole life. Never wanted to grow up and never wanted to be responsible for anything. Used to tell my kids, if you want me, I'll be down the bar. I couldn't handle anything toward the end. That's how sick I had gotten, mentally ill. It's a 3-fold disease, mental, physical, and spiritual. I was dead spiritually. It was, I just didn't believe there was a God anymore. I hated God. I thought, how could he allow? Who left was to blame? There was no one left to blame, and God he wasn't going to certainly come down and argue with me. I figured if he was all powerful, how could he allow the things to happen to me that they did? And I just didn't know I didn't know a lot of things. I just didn't know. See, I believe we are what our teachers teach us. And I had some pretty sick teachers in my life. And that don't make them bad, God love them. Because, I passed on to my children the same things that were passed on to me. They did the best they could with what they had. And that's just the way it was supposed to be. But I had to put some new teachers in my life today, and I've done that since coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. I divorced that husband after 17-and-a-half years, and I married a gentleman that I went to high school with my children. Talk about shame and guilt. He was 15 years my junior. He was 15 years younger than me. And I was truly sick. I was homicidal and suicidal when I got here. And I just was self-destructive, and I just drank and drank and drank, and that's just what I did. I wanted to end it all. I was about 35 years old, and I was a barmaid in a biker bar at that point in time, Big Falls. And it's a place down in Baltimore County on Route 7. And I was sitting there with a friend of mine, and I don't ever want to forget this, and we were splitting a bottle of tequila. I loved tequila and 100 proof vodka. That seemed to be working pretty good for me at that point in time. And I was getting to the part where I was seeking the ultimate high. And we heard the tequila worm was the bomb. We heard that was the route to go, actually. And we had one of them intelligent conversations that alcoholics have. We were going to sit there and split the worm in half, and I didn't want the end with the eyes because I didn't want the poor little thing looking at me when I swallowed them. You know, and I got up off of that bar stool, and I'm here to tell you I was not where I needed to be. I was not experiencing the effects of alcohol at all. I just couldn't get drunk anymore. I couldn't depend on booze. I couldn't depend on it. It turned on me. And I didn't understand all that because I had never had any kind of program, never had any exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got up and I said to Mike, business doesn't look bad. What, are you cutting your liquor? He said, no, Sharon, I'm not cutting my liquor. Yeah, I just didn't know. I just didn't know. So I continued, and one day on my birthday, somebody slipped me some other substance, and I immediately found the right combination that I liked. See, one of the first lessons I ever learned in Turk House when I walked in there was I had been an alcoholic long before I picked up any other substance, but booze stopped working for me. So I found the right combination of anything that I could put in my system to take Sharon out of Sharon, because I could no longer live inside of my skin or live with me. I just couldn't. You know, I thought I was the worst human being on the side of this earth. You know, I knew what I was. I was not a pretty drunk. So I walked in there, and thank God, people would come in from their meetings, and I would raise my hand, and the only thing I would ask them was, hi, how do you get rid of this craving? It was horrible. I was like an empty shell just walking around. And they said, go and pray. And I thought, yeah, right. You know, God never answered any of my prayers. Thank God he never gave me what I asked for. I asked for some pretty stupid stuff, you know, and that's the same answer I got every night, was pray. Ask God to help you. He'll get rid of your cravings. And eventually, I guess about 5 or 6 days after going through that process, I eventually did ask God to do something with me. I said, please do something with me. I can't live like this any longer. And a couple days later, I had no idea of time. My paralysis and my craving was gone. People would bring meetings, and I was very attracted to the horror stories. They would talk about these horrible things they did while under the influence of alcohol. And I could relate immediately. I mean, it was like all these knots were being removed in my stomach. They were putting words on these feelings, you know, and I began to identify. I mean, at that point in time, I was willing to be anything than insane. I thought I was due to inherit my mother's insanity, and I would have rather died than spend the rest of my life in Spring Grove like my mother in a corner with some lady tossing a baby in the air. You know, I thought it was a genetic thing, and I was due to inherit her insanity. You know, and I just looked at they taught me to look at my alcohol, look at my track record and my drinking, and I did. And I knew that I had a problem with alcohol. I just knew it. And so I stayed. I stayed there, and it wasn't easy. I was ready to leave after about 2 weeks. And they told me, Sharon, you know, I have to go home. My kids need me. And they said, you know, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be good to anyone else. And they put everything on the back burner and get sober. Because how can you help anyone else if you can't help yourself? And that's true. So I stayed, and I left there, and I went into Safe House. You know, and I got there, and I stayed there about a month and a half, and I got sober in South Baltimore. And I got a home group, and I got a sponsor. And I mean, it took a while, but I never used a sponsor. Actually, I was sober about 6 months before I got a sponsor. And I mean, if there's any way that you could stay sober and have any sense of serenity and peace of mind without working these steps, I have not found it. I tried. I tried to be, you know, some sort of serenity and peace of mind in my life, just not drinking. It didn't work. I got sicker. I was still the same person. You know, and they told me, you know, that the same person will drink again. You must clean house, trust God, and work with another alcoholic. Begin to work the steps. You know, find out some things about yourself. And I didn't want to look at myself. I was too busy pointing the blame at everybody else my whole life. You know, so what I did was I eventually got a sponsor. I took some guy hostage, actually. I was 2.5 months sober, and he was 3 years sober. And I'd known him when we were kids. And I got involved in a relationship, and I don't recommend this to anyone, but this is my story. I left Safe House, and I got involved with this gentleman, and everyone in our life was in Alcoholics Anonymous or in Al-Anon, and we just threw ourselves in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we got involved in intergroup, we got involved in general services, we got home group. We grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous. We got very active. Everything in our life was conventions. We went to Akron. We just loved Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, it became a way of life for me. And our relationship was rocky, and as long as we stayed involved with other people and we worked with our sponsors and stayed out of ourselves, you know, things went along okay. I got a home group. My original home group was Fort McHenry down in Towson Street, and my sponsor, Betty H., of my original sponsor, you know, we did a fifth step right before my first year anniversary, and I didn't want to do these things. I did not want to do these things. I thought, yeah, she used to tell me, tell your darkest secrets first. The ones, when you do a fifth step, put down your darkest secrets first on your fourth step. Make a searching and fearless moral inventory, and I'm like, yeah, some of these are going to the grave with me. And but she pointed out to me, Sharon, you must trust God and clean house. She said, or the same man will drink again. And so I did. I did it because I just did not want to go back to living like I used to live. It was horrible. And we did a fifth step right before my first anniversary, you know, and she said to me, Sharon, she said, when you turn this page, God has forgiven you of all this. Now you have to work on forgiving yourself. That this is no longer who you are. You know? This is just what you've done. Now God's forgiven you, let it go. And that's what I've done. You know, I've worked on the process of forgiving myself for those things, and just began to do the rest of the steps and got real involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know, you know, I had a lot of pain in sobriety. My first year sober was horrendous. I don't know about people that come in here and say everything was great my first year. It wasn't that way for me. My first 3 years was horrendously horrible. I mean, some are sicker than others. I certainly am sicker than most. I really was. I brought in a lot of baggage. My first year sober, and let me explain this, because, you know, I knew that there was a power working in my life greater than myself, because I was the type of drunk that if it rained 3 days in a row, I was down the bar. I didn't need an excuse to drink. Did not need an excuse to drink. I was old enough. I was mature. Nobody was going to tell me what the heck to do. I'll be down the bar. So what I did basically was I just drank all the time. And here my first year sober, traumatic things started happening to me. I had surgery my first year sober. I had a tumor removed, and I didn't get drunk. You know, I had a daughter that was in intensive care from an overdose of another substance. I had 2 small babies, and they didn't expect her to live through the night. And I stayed sober through that. I ran the meetings. My sponsor came in. She stayed by my side. We prayed together. Got me through that. I turned myself in for some warrants, 9 months sober, because I was taught that anything that interfered with me going forward in this program, clean house. I was afraid they were going to come in and drag me off of my job in front of everybody, because I knew I had some yesterdays that needed straightening out. I didn't want to do these things. This was not me doing these things. I ran from everything in life. If you wanted me, I'd be down the bar. That's how I handled life, you know. So I knew something was working in my life. I was willing to go to any length. And so these are the things that I did. I divorced that abusive husband. He was in city jail my first year sober. I was terrified of him. And I got through that and stayed sober. You know, I did these things because I was no longer alone. And at that point in time, I really didn't even have a strong faith in God. I knew that there was a power, and at first I used these people. I wasn't able to have a caring, loving God. That came many times later. You know, God put people in my life like Mr. Carroll Henn. I love him. Loved him. He said, Sharon, the first 3 steps are real simple. I can't, you can't, he can, so let him. They're that simple. You know, and Mr. Frank Neiman, and Big George, and Lamar, you know, and these guys that I remember. I chaired a meeting 8 months over down Tip House, and Mr. Carroll Henn walked up to me. And I loved that man. He was a father, grandfather that I never had. You know, God meets us at the level of our needs. My God has just put people in my life today. He did everything short of come down and appear to me. Hello, are you home? You know, knock on wood. I couldn't dispute it. That there was definitely something working in my life, the way things were happening. And I just knew I was willing to go to any lengths and no longer wanted to go back to hurting people. And I just wanted to like myself and find out who I was. And I began that process by getting involved in these steps and by trusting people. You know, Wayne Brooks told me a very important thing in recovery, and so did my sponsor. Wayne always taught me, Sharon, it's okay to put some time between a thought and an action. I was the type of person, I was on the way out the door putting something into action, that if you're not sure what to do in any given situation, don't do anything at all. And my sponsor said to me, Sharon, I said, but Betty, you don't understand, I have so many other problems than alcohol, than drinking. I have all this, you know, all that crap from my childhood and, you know, adoption and all that stuff, you know, problems other than alcohol. She said, Sharon, I'll tell you what to do. She said, let's do this. She said, let's concentrate on learning how not to drink for a good year and working these steps. If you get a good foundation a good foundation in recovery in this program, and you learn how not to drink, you can work on any other problem that comes down the pike. And that was one of the most best information that she had ever given me in my life. It saved my life. And that's what I concentrated on first, was getting sober first and learning how not to drink. And then I sought therapy outside of this program. The book talks about it. You know, if we need help outside of the program, seek it. There's many, many trained professionals out there that are very worthwhile in helping us with problems other than alcohol, and that's what I did. I went into psychotherapy for 3 years after that to deal with all that other stuff. You know, and I'm okay with that today. God is kind, caring, and loving. I love my higher power today. He shows me that He's still working in my life on a daily basis through you people. You know, He spoon-fed me through you people. You know, and for Him to take someone like me, as cruel and cold-hearted, and the way I'd hurt people in my life, and to show me what kind of life, and to give me a life that I have today. If I told you what my life was today, you'd think I was lying. You'd think I was lying. One of my husbands, and talk about them, they talk about the 4 horsemen. I think I married 3 of them. God bless them. They did the best they could with what they had. They were my biggest enablers. They practically loved me to death. You know, and my husband, my second husband, and he's still a good friend of mine today. God love me, never got sober. He's a good man, and I still have him on my I still have him on my 9th step. But I'm afraid he might think, and his wife won't let me near him, that he might think I might want him back. Anytime I'm nice to him, he thinks I want to hop down the road with them, so I don't want them to misinterpret my 9th step. And there will come a time, I believe that, for me to tell them what a good man he was. He practically loved me to death, and I want to thank him for that. He raised my children, and my 35-year-old, my 34-year-old daughter and son still call him Dad today. He never got sober. But he said to me one time, and I never forget this, I don't remember too much of my past. I don't talk a whole lot about it, my drinking days, because I don't remember a whole lot about it, to be honest with you. He said, Sharon, you know, if I didn't feed you, you'd starve to death. And you know the sad part about that was, it was true. And I was a senior cosmetologist, went to real estate school, went to the college, had some college credits, and I was that dependent on him. I was crippled mentally. I was totally dependent on everyone my whole life. I got sick and tired of everybody feeding me and taking care of poor Sharon. And that's what it was as a child. Poor Sharon, nobody wants her. We'll take her for a while. And all I ever wanted to do was to be independent, take care of Sharon. And that's real important to me today. You know, I have confidence in the future and self-respect and self-esteem. And I have a God that loves me. And it took me years sober before I believed that God really loved me. I want to share with you about a resentment I had. I had it 5 years sober. And I couldn't get rid of this resentment. It was at my father, a man I never knew who was God love him. He never said an alcoholic, but he never got sober. And I went into therapy after I began to get sober for years, and because I was taught that resentments are the luxuries of others, I knew I couldn't have this resentment. I couldn't get rid of it. I hated this man. I hated him for what he had done to my kids and for what he had done in life. And I couldn't get rid of this resentment. And I talked to my therapist and I talked to my sponsor, and she said, Sharon, I'll go with you. And I just couldn't do it because all I wanted him to do was love me and accept me because he adopted me at one time, and I hated him for what he was and who he was and the things he had done during his alcoholism. And I couldn't get rid of this resentment. And you know, 5 years sober, I'm still trying to love this man. And I'm saying, I don't care what these people in AA say, I just can't get it. I can't forgive this man. And I'm here to tell you, I've felt forgiveness for the first time in my life, 5 years sober. God allowed me to feel forgiveness. My father died. I read it in the newspaper because I hadn't seen him for a couple years. I didn't know how to deal with this resentment. So I detached, and not with love. I detached in an angry way. I do anger real well. I can still do anger, and I have to watch that still today. And I was taught that we try to align our thinking toward God. So I jumped up off the couch and I said to my boyfriend, my God, my father died. It's in the newspaper, and what am I going to do? And he wouldn't answer me. Should I go? Shouldn't I go? You know, I don't know what to do. And he wouldn't answer me. I called my friend Eddie in the program, whom I trusted, and he wouldn't tell me whether I should go. And they knew the circumstances. I called my sponsor. She wasn't home. I prayed about it, so I went to sleep. And a lot of times when I sleep, I usually wake up in the morning refreshed, and I usually know what to do. And I woke up in the morning, and I said to my boyfriend, I'm going. My daughter said, Mom, if you go, I'll never speak to you again. And you know, the bottom line was, I must stay sober, and I thought about it. You know, he's still my father. And I do nasty and angry and hate real well, and that's not what I want to be about in sobriety today. And I asked God to give me the courage, and I went to that funeral parlor, and I didn't want to go, and I walked in there, and I seen all my brothers, and they said, oh, hi, how you doing? And I hadn't seen them for years, and I said, I'm fine, I'm here to see him. And they asked me if I wanted to go in the limo, and I said, no, I'm just here to see my father. And I walked over to the coffin, and I knew immediately, when I looked in his eyes, I knew that man had met his Maker. I knew he just had answers for all the things he had done in his life. And I sat there and I stayed for the services because I felt I needed them. I needed to say a prayer for this man and to help myself forgive him. Because I knew when I looked in his face, dead and cold in that coffin, he had met his Maker. I knew that, without a doubt. Nothing, no lights. I just knew in my heart, the way I knew that God wanted me to stay here and do this. That I wasn't a bad person, that I had been sick. I suffer from the disease of alcoholism. no shame to that. And I walked out of that funeral parlor, and I opened them doors, and going down them steps, I knew deep in my heart that who in the heck am I to judge that man? He had been an alcoholic that never got sober. That some of the things that I did during my alcoholism hurt people just as bad as he did. Maybe not the same things I did. I did not do the same things he did, but I hurt people just as much as he did during my alcoholism. And who was I to judge him? He never got sober, and I thank God for getting me sober. And for that moment, just for a moment, I felt forgiveness, and I was able to forgive that man. And that's just what my life has been since I've been sober. Phenomenal. I have a daughter that is in recovery, thank God, hopefully for the last time, who overdosed this December the 14th. And I got the call. And I went there not knowing what to expect. And thank God. She has a little paralysis that's getting better. Her memory's getting better. But she died, and I believe God kept her on earth for a reason. That's to get her sober and to help another woman. I have a son 4 years sober in another fellowship. I know what it's like to go through addiction and to let go of our children. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do besides get sober in this program. And I didn't have to do it alone. I had people in my life. I had you people, and I had a God. I have a God today that's gotten me through all this. I believe that God got me sober for two reasons. Because He didn't want me to die ignorant. He just knew that I didn't know. And that He wanted me to help another drunk. That's the only reason. And that's what I'm here to do today, carry my message of recovery, my experiences, strength, and hopes. That's all I got to give you. Not my opinions, but just my experiences. What I've been through, what I go through. See, I believe that all alcoholics out there still drinking aren't suffering. There's a whole heck of a lot of us in these rooms that are still suffering, that are sober, that have children or have lost loved ones. I have new heroes today. There are people in these rooms that are dying physically from cancer, from other ailments, that are not drinking. To me, they're heroes. That have had some time, 15, 20 years, 8 years, 10 years, that humbly come back in and say, pick up a one-day tip. That's phenomenal. I don't know if I could do it. That kind of courage has got to be coming from somebody, somewhere. That are burying loved ones and not taking a drink. When I buried my fiance 5 years ago, he died sober. And he died from an aneurysm. That funeral parlor was swamped with people. And I remember the only thing I could recall was a lady that said she had buried 2 sons. I never knew her, but I heard her share in a meeting that she had buried 2 sons and did not drink. The same night they died, got their heads cut off in a car accident. And she had buried those boys and did not take a drink. To me, that's a hero. It's not those guys out on the parking lot kicking butt drunk up like that used to be my heroes. So I've got new heroes today in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm watching you people, and I'm listening. And I'll tell you, I listened to that lady, and I never knew her. But I remembered her story, and I remembered her sharing that, because when I buried my fiance, I remember what she said. So you never know who's listening. You never know who's going to touch, whose hearts are going to touch. And so I really want to thank my higher power and people in Alcoholics Anonymous for being in my life today. My life depends on you people. And I believe that recovery is a gift, and what I do with it is my gift back to God. Thank you.